Okay, so item number 3, the community. Sorry. Item number 2, members' interests. Do any members have any interests they wish to declare tonight? No, thank you. Okay, item number 3, the community governance review, Glatton and Conington parishes. So I invite the officer to speak, Lisa Jablonska, to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the purposes of this report is boundary between Glatton and Conington parishes. The request that's come through from Glatton Parish Council, so they passed a resolution at their meeting in March to request the Principal Authority, Huntingdon District Council, to review the parish boundary. So you'll see a copy of the request that came through in Appendix A, and you've got the accompanying maps that identify the areas concerned. So the request came through in respect of them. The request reflected, they wanted it to change to reflect the anomalous boundaries, to reflect the current local identities and facilitate effective neighbourhood plans. So Glatton Parish Council approached Conington Parish Council with this request, and you'll see in the report that Conington are against such a request. So in this instance, so as an authority, it is our responsibility to conduct community governance arrangements and to facilitate and keep things under review. So just drawing attention to the consultation that took place, Glatton Parish Council did actually contact Conington Parish Council, and I made contact with them in terms of the request that came through. So you'll see the response that came back from Conington Parish Council in Appendix 2 and their reasons for not proceeding with a community governance review. So as an authority, you can consider it. So as a committee, it's your responsibility to consider this request. What I would say, it is unusual for us as an authority to undertake a community governance review when we've got these opposing views. So and just you'll see the recommendations in front of you. So there's an opportunity for you to debate as to whether you would want to proceed with a CGR, and with that in mind, we would bring the terms of reference back to your future meeting, or else decline to instigate a CGR. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. So do any of the members of the committee have any questions on the report, and any comments as well? Thank you, Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question for Lisa, really. How many CGRs have the council done in the last few years? And an adjoining question, I guess, because I don't know whether they all have to go via CGR or not, but how many times do you remember the parish boundaries within the district being changed?
Through you, Chair. We haven't, from recollection, undertaken a parish boundary change under the existing legislation. We did a full-scale, I'm looking at Councillor Gray, we did a whole review of parish boundaries under the old Local Government Rating Act. So we undertook that some time ago. Since then, we've considered CGRs in respect of an increase or decrease in number of parish councillors, but in respect of specific boundary arrangements, no, we haven't.
Thank you, Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. When I look at this, I mean, I have a lot of sympathy with both parties. I think it's how I would express this. I can see exactly why Glatton have asked for it. The idea that it comes so close to the built form of the Glatton parish and actually sort of almost curls around underneath it and comes around the other side. I do understand the concerns that they've got there. Likewise, I note that Conington is saying there are a couple of historic sites that are referred to as being Conington within the area that Glatton are hoping to transfer over. And obviously, we should, in many ways, we should respect the historic nature of how our communities have been built up over time. So I have a lot of sympathy for, I have to say, both parties, which sounds awfully like I'm sort of sitting on the hedge here, or the fence. whichever it might be. Certainly not the A1, that's for certain. I suppose the bigger question might be, to the point, Lisa, that you've just given, it is clearly a number of years since we last did this. The point is made by Conington that if HDC are going to do this, it should be done in a more joined up and coherent manner rather than piecemeal. And I suppose the question I would ask you, and I would ask the Managing Director, respectful, of course, of the resources of the District Council, is should we perhaps schedule at some point, perhaps within the next, municipal cycle, so to speak, should we perhaps schedule a review of these kind of arrangements and call for parishes to say, here's some things that we find unusual or anomalous. Could the district look at those in the round across the whole district, and perhaps put together some policies as to how we might judge whether something was or wasn't satisfactory?
Through you, Chair. I'll be honest, that's a massive exercise, and I think each parish would be considered on their own merits. And I think, notwithstanding the fact that the wider picture in terms of there would be potentially it would be followed down through a review of electoral arrangements in terms of the various tiers. So you would almost start with the county division review, district, and then move down through the parishes. So we're not, as it stands at the moment, scheduled for a principal area review in terms of the district council arrangements. So generally that would be how it would follow in terms of, and this is when we undertook the review of the whole parish council arrangements before, we'd already gone through a district review. So just picking up before I invite the Chief Executive to come in, just the only other thing I would say is depending on the outcome tonight, I mean, if you're minded to decline the request, it may be that you could go back to Glatton and seek their views in terms of whether there's an opportunity for them to go back to the electorate in terms of inviting, if they're so minded they still want to pursue this, that they could do this by way of a petition. So under the legislation, so that it would be if a petition came in that was just supported by at least 50% of the electorate, then it would be something that we'd have to undertake a CGR as well. So you'd get a bit more of a steer in terms of the feeling locally in terms of the electorate. So.
And if I may continue through the chair, I think just on that latter point, that having a broader democratic mandate in terms of that 50% would give the district council far more confidence that there is merit in taking that forward in terms of listening to a larger number of voices. So I would agree with our democratic services manager in respect to that point. Going back to the point around almost a call for yes. I suspect that the very nature of some parishes over time that there would be quite a few anomalies, and I agree that would be very resource intensive. And I suppose I would be concerned about managing parishes' expectations in having had a call for those anomalies and then trying to find the time to deliver those and prioritise which of those was greater than others, because we wouldn't be able to do them all at once. It'd have to be a sequential programme. So I think that would be something we would need to think carefully about before we did that. It might be something, we have the Town and Parish Conference coming up in October, because it's LGA. It's the same day as LGA conference. It might be something that there was a sort of a bit of a random consultation or a box that people put ideas in, and we could engage with parishes that way to get a feel for what the issue is, rather than doing a formal call for anomalies, which I then come back to managing expectations.
Yes, Councillor Gray and then Councillor Sheen.
Yeah, okay. That's, I think, quite a helpful steer, and may help us in our deliberations here as to think as to, how to perhaps respond to Glatton with regards to their request. Can I just clarify with with the Chief Executive? Obviously, they're trying to put together a neighbourhood plan. Presumably, Glatton can't put forward a neighbourhood plan that incorporates part of another parish.
Through the chair, no, I don't believe they can, because it's not within their boundary to them, which they're democratically elected in order then to propose a solution for their for their locality. So that, again, I think, as you say, not unsympathetic to the challenges that are raised, but that's where potentially, when you debate the idea of if the decision is decline, invite a petition, and that will then give you the steer for whether there is that broader support within the parish to extend into that area for part of their neighbourhood plan and what their wider objectives may be through the neighbourhood plan.
Councillor Shaw?
Thank you. I think, as you said, it would be quite straightforward if Conington Parish Council were in agreement also. You know, it would be quite a straightforward procedure. I think the argument they give that it would be logical to divide the parishes by the A1. If you look at the district as a whole, it's a right hodgepodge of anomalous bendy boundaries that don't follow any of the lines of any of the roads. My own parish of Brampton has the A14 running across the top and the A1 straight down the middle. If you started chopping it up according to the lines of the roads, it'd be a right old mess. And as you mentioned, I think it'd be a massive undertaking. It could potentially open the floodgates for similar applications from other parishes and would be a massive amount of work and a huge amount of cost. That's just my thoughts.
Bringing in Lisa.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I mean, the exercise we undertook some years ago in terms of under the old Act we had parish boundaries that were cutting through directly through properties, and so, you know, and historically things will change over time as well, really. And we did tidy up quite a lot at the time, but naturally with development, you know, things will change over time. So I think but you know, going back to the Chief Executive's comments, it is a massive exercise. It would involve, if every single, you know, parish came forward and said they wanted a CGR, it would involve a separate consultation on every single CGR. So yeah, just want to manage everybody's expectations on that one. So yeah, thank you.
Councillor Shaw?
Sorry, another comment. I mean, I think obviously looking at it within the local plan consultation, obviously there's a significant potential area of land there for development. Presumably, if we went ahead and the decision was made to change those parish boundaries, that Conington Parish Council would lose perhaps a considerable sum of S106 or SIL money income. Would that be the case?
Potentially, yes, they would do. I'm not the service expert, but absolutely. But yeah, the SIL money would go to the parish, and if the area is contained within their civil parish boundary, then absolutely, yeah.
I think that would be quite a big factor, because it's essentially asking Conington to potentially give up future improvements to the local area. Yeah, it's a big sway in my decision-making process.
Okay, Gray, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that, but I mean, I can also appreciate the people in Glatton thinking all the development is right by my village and all of the SIL has disappeared to a village that's not affected by this at all. Chair, I don't know how you are intending to proceed here, but I mean, I certainly think that the suggestion that Lisa has made with regards to getting some democratic mandate to demonstrate to us that this isn't just 5 parish councillors that think this is a good idea, seems to have merit, and if you were to bring that forward, I would support that.
Right, before moving on, I just want to check if anyone has any more comments or questions. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it would perhaps be beneficial for us to have someone from the planning department present, because I think a lot of the change of the boundary would have potential implications on planning and neighbourhood plans. Obviously, if Glatton are intending on, from looking at some of the Glatton Parish Council meetings, they intend on using the neighbourhood plan to protect this area as part of that neighbourhood plan, which I'm assuming they would perhaps register it as a green space area in an attempt to do that. I was looking at local plan guidance, and it would seem to indicate that where is it? There was a section that said a care is required to ensure that green space policy is not being misused, for example, through making decisions to stop development rather than to ensure proper green space provision. So I think it'd be advantageous to have somebody with a little bit more planning knowledge present for us to quiz on the finer details of that kind of application.
Thank you. In terms of making a decision as to whether to decline or approve the request, the planning function isn't part of the criteria for which you're considering. And if we perhaps refer back to the earlier comments around, I think if I may take Councillor Gray's point around a broader democratic mandate from the 50% of a petition as opposed to perhaps what might be perceived as a small number of parish councillors making a decision, that's where you are in that decision making, as opposed to what our planning colleagues may say, because the planning criteria isn't something that's per se consideration in reaching a decision tonight in respect of that. If that were a decision that would come, if there were a decision later on around to carry out the community governance review, then quite possibly you would want to test some of the impact of that. But the actual decision now as to whether to decline or approve, in terms of advice, doesn't really require a planning colleague to be present. That would be my advice to you.
Yeah, just for clarity purposes as well, in terms of if a petition is submitted as such, and we would obviously proceed with the CGR, there is still a consultation exercise that would need to be undertaken. So obviously that would be, there would be a wider consultation, not just with the residents of Glatton. It would involve Conington. It would involve a wider exercise. So certainly, and then the results of that consultation would still come back to you as members for you to consider further. So it's not a straightforward yes or no, and yes, the petition comes in, and yes, the boundaries will be changed. So I just wanted to clarify that as well, really.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you. Can I just clarify, if Conington Parish Council were in agreement with Glutton's proposals, would it still go to a CGR before it be implemented?
Correct, through your chair, yeah. So there would be. So the intention was. So if you're minded to approve the request that's come in today, the intention would be to bring back terms of reference to your next committee, and then we would go out to consultation. So yeah, absolutely. So if they're both in agreement, you agree this evening, then it would then would follow drafting the terms of reference to go out to public consultation.
Councillor Jennings and Councillor Shaw.
I think I'd be very minded then to be in a similar position to Councillor Gray, but perhaps also give them the option that if they could come back with either 50% of local residents via the petition, or an agreement with Conington Parish Council as an alternative, so that if they perhaps amended the plans and got the agreement of the neighbouring parish, that could be an alternative way.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. Just as a point of clarity, so let's just assume that we decided tonight to conduct a governance review. There's no guarantee that this would actually happen. It would just be reviewed, and then a decision to either accept or reject it would be made, yeah?
Absolutely. Sorry, through you, Chair. Yeah, so so in terms of following that consultation exercise, as we have done with previous CGRs, the results of that consultation would come back to you as members for you to consider, and then obviously you would consider any comments that have come in and obviously make a decision accordingly. So it's not as clear cut saying, once if that petition comes in, it's there is there then follows the consultation. Yeah.
Brilliant. Are there any more comments or questions? No? Okay, good. So just referring to the recommendation, there are two options that the committee must decide. So please may I request a show of hands when voting. So I'm just going to go through the two options to consider. To consider the options to proceed as follows. Option A, to conduct a community governance review as requested by Glatton Parish Council to alter the parish boundaries as Glatton Parish and neighbouring parish of Conington, with terms of reference of the review and timetable for consultation to be considered on the next meeting of the committee. Or option B, to decline to instigate a community governance review, giving the reasons for a decision. So if we go to a vote, yes,
Excuse
Councillor
me,
Gray.
Chair, could we just amend option B to say that we're going to decline to do it at this particular meeting, but would consider doing it if either a petition of more than 50% of Glatton population is in favour, or an agreement with Conington Parish Council is reached that a CGR should take place. Is that? I'm seeing some nods.
So if it's helpful, Chair, Councillor Gray, is that a proposal?
Let's make that a proposal.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Jennings? Yes, come in, Councillor
Could
Shaw.
it also involve a consultation with Conington residents, perhaps? Or is this getting too complicated? Forgive me.
If I may, I think the very fact those two options will need, well, if you go for the, if the first option, which was come back with a 50% petition, there is then a democratic mandate from a much larger percentage of the residents within Glatton, which would then take you almost that, actually there's merit in taking this forward. And as our Democratic Service Officer manager has said, actually once we get 50%, then we are obliged. So you get that. If the second part of that is complied with in terms of Conington's agreement, by the very nature you would have had the discussions with the fellow parish council itself. So either way, you're broadening that out into more people being involved in the next stage of that. So I think in terms of clarity, you have a proposal before you, which is to decline, but decline at this stage, but either come back with the 50% petition or come back with a joint agreement between the two parish councils. And that gives you the flex as opposed to a straightforward no. That's helpful.
Okay, so we've got the proposal and seconder. Are we happy? Are we in agreement that that is what we want to choose? And all those in favour? Yes, that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you. So now we move on to item number 4, the Code of Conduct complaint update, which is on item 4 of our agenda. And Lisa, it's over to you for the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall you get this as a regular update. So this is your annual update on Code of Conduct complaints, so alleged breaches of Code of Conduct. So as a committee, it's your responsibility to maintain high standards of conduct for members of the district and town and parish councils. So it's a report for noting, but again, as summarised in the report, you'll see there's been very little activity over the past year. So each of the cases listed have been resolved, and they've all been conducted in accordance with the monitoring officer protocol and also done in conjunction with our independent person. And just making that distinction, it's the independent person appointed that you appoint at council as opposed to the independent member that sits on the Corporate Governance Committee. Happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Any comments or questions? Councillor Gray?
Just one on page 26, 24/63, where a complaint on 4 different levels around the Code of Conduct came in. Obviously, the matter concluded following the resignation of the subject member before any formal investigation. I assume, therefore, you can't investigate somebody who's no longer a parish council. What if they rejoined a parish? What if they became a parish council member again? Would the same complaint, you know, it just seems sort of slightly ironic that you can kind of stop the clock and then kind of, if they rejoined, would you reopen that investigation?
Through you, Chair. This was one that, in accordance with our monitoring officer protocol, it was at parish level, town council level. So in accordance with our protocol, it would be for the town and parish council to investigate. So it would really depend on their own internal procedures in terms of how they deal with complaints. But equally, should that member have rejoined the council, there is certainly in our protocol, there's a period of time that if that period of time has exceeded that investigation, then we wouldn't certainly conduct an investigation. It's an interesting question. I'm not sure I know the answer to. So, yeah.
It has been something that was discussed when we used to have the Standards Board for England, and it was an issue there where, and in fact the Information Commissioner's Office dealt with the consideration of that as well, where obviously not here, but a member had been investigated, and prior to the formal hearing to consider the report, they resigned, and therefore there was no public interest in taking that through to formal hearing. There was an FOI request for the report, which initially was declined to submit because there was no public interest. There was then later on a finding that actually there still remained a public interest, because at some future point that member could have, that non-member could have restood for election or in parish level being co-opted. Now, the distinction that was made there in terms of when is there not a public interest was how far that process had gone. And because it had gone so far to literally before the hearing into the report, so the investigation had been undertaken, the report in the findings had been produced, discussed between relevant parties, that complaints process had carried on so much further than actually someone resigning before the investigation had been complete. So there was some debate around that. So it's probably a horses for courses in terms of those future, should that happen again, in terms of where that is. And as Lisa has said, where that sits in terms of, for us as district, timescales. It's an interesting point.
Anyone else, any comments or questions? No? Okay, that's fine. Okay, so we're just going to note the progress of the outstanding code of conduct complaints. Thank you, and that's just been noted. So moving on to item number 5, the use of surveillance under the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, RIPA, inspection report update. So I will introduce Katie. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. At the last meeting of the Corporate Governance Committee, the committee received a report on the activities undertaken by the corporate fraud team. And as part of that report, it was noted that the council had undergone an inspection of its use of covert surveillance by the regulator, the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office. The committee were advised that the outcome of that inspection would be reported in due course, and today's report provides that update. So local authorities are permitted to use covert techniques to support investigations and enforcement activities for investigations into criminal offences where the maximum custodial sentence is at least 6 months. And to ensure that local authorities comply with the law when exercising those powers, the council is subject to periodic inspections. Most recently, this was completed on the 20th of June. So as part of the inspection, detailed discussions were held with key personnel from across the organisation, and policies, documentation and record keeping were all inspected. I'm pleased to confirm that the outcome report delivered from IPCO, which you can find in Appendix A, confirmed that the inspector was really impressed by the professional attitude displayed by colleagues with regards to compliance with the legislation. And the report goes on to provide assurance that the council demonstrates good practices regarding record keeping, and that the council's policy sets out the situation well. Now, as a result of the discussions that we had during the inspection, there were a few areas where it was identified that we could take action to enhance the practices that we already have, and these are highlighted at point 3.5 in the report. And you'll see some details of some planned activities in response to that at 3.6. Overall, officers found the inspection to be a really useful experience. We've taken a lot of learning from it, and obviously got a plan to deliver training and awareness sessions across the organisation. So welcome any comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the committee? So sure.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, I think it's a good report. Obviously, it's identified a few areas that need improvement. Personally, Just as a way of feedback on the layout of the report, on item 3.6, the table of sort of actions and responses, I'd personally like to see a better link between the letter and the recommendations made and the resolutions within that table. For example, it states under sort of section 1, collateral intrusion is poorly understood, and both applications stated they'd resulted in no collateral intrusion occurring despite having covert cameras deployed in public place. And the only thing referenced in that table regarding the collateral intrusion is under the policy and record keeping, but it obviously states that understanding is low. I mean, I know it's possibly covered under the training and awareness section, I'm assuming, but it would be nice to see perhaps a direct link between item number 1 and the resolution, i.e. the training that resolves that particular matter. So it's not anything specifically related to actions or anything, but more, perhaps it would be an easier way to lay it out.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? No, I just want to say thank you to Katie Kelly. I know a significant amount of work went into that, so thank you for your report. So that's been noted. Thank you. So now, so Katie, feel free to leave the meeting. That's fine. Thank you. So now on to item number 6, corporate risk register. So moving on to this item, Michelle will speak on behalf of Ollie to hand this over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So again, this is our regular report on risk. I think, as we say, I still consider this to be work in progress. It's certainly something Councillor Ferguson and I have talked about in terms of, as Councillor Ferguson's lead portfolio holder for this. And I am relieved that we have Suzanne Jones joining us from next Tuesday as our new Section 151, who will be able to give this, again, a different perspective in terms of those ongoing evolution and improvement. I'm happy to take questions, and I'm going to say ably assisted by Yasir this evening. Over to you, committee.
Thank you. Any comments or questions about the risk register, or Councillor Jennings?
Thank you, Chair. I know it's something I've asked about a few times before, actually, which is the movement of risks from one report to the next. And I think it gets interpreted as the movement of risk from inherent to residual. Whereas what I'm actually more interested in seeing, because it's quite it's a big report, it's a chunky report to try and read each time it comes to this committee. And when I tried comparing it to the last report, after the first 20 minutes of reading, and you realise that it's exactly the same. And so you're just trying to find the bits that have changed from the last time that you saw the report, either because the things I'll be most interested in, has that residual risk moved in any direction, i.e. have we got more mitigating factors that are going against the risk to make it look better, or is there some new, or is one of our mitigations not working and the residuals ending up moving up a level, for example? So rather than drowning in a huge risk register, which is lovely, and we all love a risk register every meeting, just that, even if there's just a summary page that can just signpost us to risks that have changed their inherent risk and or the new risks that have been added or risks taken away, I think that would be a useful overview document to signpost members to the things that are actually changing.
Thank you, and I do get what you mean there. So actually almost an exception reporting, so as the cover, and then you've got the detail if you want to go behind. We can definitely do that, and that doesn't need to be a complicated format either. Yes, we can do that. Yes, yeah, we can pick up that in the interim, and we will have that. Actually, we'll have a version for you at the next Corporate Governance Committee in November. No, yes, it is November, so that we can see what that format looks like, because then that will be far more use of your time as members when you're looking through the report in terms of where you can extract the value. Yes, okay.
Brilliant. Just any more comments or questions? Yep, Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. My one is on page 43, which is basically cybersecurity, which is obviously a very high risk and remains a very high risk because it is a very high risk. There's a series of risk controls and mitigations sort of highlighted in the whichever column it is, risk control and mitigation area. Things like, for example, the penultimate paragraph, undertaking a cyber breach exercise to test preparedness. And I think it would be really helpful to have something of a briefing as to how this is all actually going to this panel, because I think of all the risks that we've got out there, this is the one that is most likely to take us down and make us all look really rather silly. I think we'll find our way through a financial problem. We'll find our way through a staffing recruitment problem. If somebody closes down this council and takes all of your data, we're shut. And there's nothing we can do about that other than pay somebody an awful lot of money. So personally, Chair, I would like to see a little bit more information as to, or a separate, not necessarily a separate report, but perhaps something coming back to our next meeting that just gives us some more assurance around what is happening in these areas. So, Michelle, have we undertaken the cyber breach exercise? We're halfway through the year now. Up the top of the action required, more training and familiarity activities for staff. That sounds pretty vague to me. So what are we doing? I mean, in two organisations that I'm in, I get a test every month around cybersecurity. Is that rolled out across this authority, for example? I think just evidencing what we're doing here and where we've got to. Insurance, you know, what have we got? What can we access? What should we access? I think that those kind of questions as well, I would quite like as a member of this committee to bottom out. So I'm not expecting you to have all the answers to that now, but I think it would be really helpful to bring a sort of briefing note to the next committee meeting, given that this is we recognise this as our number one risk.
Thank you, through the chair. It's something that I share with you as it's a number one risk, because actually it's not just the incident itself, it is the enormous length of time that it takes to retain any sense of normality. And there are examples of local authorities, Gloucester is a very good example, which still is experiencing impact following its cyber breach. And we knew, Lisa and I, during the last general election, so fortunately we had our May elections, there was some learning from that from around the rest of the UK, which was implemented in terms of our own arrangements for ensuring the testing and additional resources we put in, as an example there, specifically around weekends, because that was an area that was identified as being a weakness in terms of those who seek to undertake cyber attacks. We'd seen again through that intel that was a weakness. So again, we strengthened that during that high profile period. You'll be assured that actually I probably could go into quite a length of detail on this because it is a priority, but it's something we will bring back. And it's always a timely one. I think the testing of staff is a really good one. So what we have at the moment is we have pretend phishing emails. So they're generated by our ICT team, and you wouldn't know they weren't from an external body. And there is a series of how you respond to those. If you don't pick up if you're not alert to the various sort of things you should be, and you click on the embedded link, you are then absolutely flagged, and then you are required to go on additional training, and you are monitored. There is a very direct feedback in respect of that process, but we will bring that to you because it is our number one risk in terms of getting services delivered to our residents, but actually the financial implications as well post trying to deal with it.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw.
It's actually on the same vein to Councillor Gray's comment. There was actually a presentation made in the scrutiny panel not long ago, which detailed quite a lot of that, not necessarily everything that was mentioned, but whether they could perhaps bring something to this panel, perhaps.
That was going to be my intention. I think for transparency, it is an exempt item because some of the things we are doing, again, is around what we're doing. So therefore, not to publicise that, but more than happy to share that. It was a good session actually in terms of what we are doing. So yeah, we'll do that.
Thank you. Just any more comments and questions? Or we're good. Thank you. So just to note, item 6. So now we move on to item number 7, the Internal Audit Service Progress Report, and welcoming Yasir Khan to deliver the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So basically a quick synopsis on internal audit is since I've joined about 2.5 months ago, we've completed about 4 audits. One of it has been a follow-up review. So that came with about 3 actions, and all of 3 of those have been implemented. The 3 other audits, which were fresh audits, for 2 of the audits, we have agreed the action plans with the teams. One of the audit has been budgetary control, which is a finance audit. So we've agreed the plan with Sharon, who sits here. And the second one has been an operational audit, which related to vehicle maintenance. And again, the action plan has been agreed with Colin Moss, the transport manager there. Generally, I would say the control environment has been good in both of these areas. It's just a matter of enhancing the already solid controls we have got. And then the third audit, which we are still working towards its action plan and finalizing that, is the Code of Procurement audit. And that is an audit whereby some significant work needs to be done to improve the control environment. And yesterday we had a meeting with SLT, and hopefully for the next meeting in November, we can present the whole action plan, which has been agreed to resolve the findings.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for Yasir? Councillor Shaw?
Just a question, the Code of Procurement, what areas is this procurement of any goods or services that the council need?
Yeah, so through the chair, it's quite a broad area, and the Code of Procurement covers pretty much from contracts for services through to maybe procuring goods. So it's both goods and services. So it's a really, really broad area. So yeah, to your question, yeah, it covers all areas from services to physical, maybe purchasing laptops, to maybe bin services or having a contract with our bin providers. So,
Yeah, Councillor Shaw?
Thank you. I know in the most recent scrutiny Environment and Communities and Partnerships Scrutiny Panel meeting, I think it was part of the health and wellbeing strategy was related to local procurement. Is there any provision for local procurement within this Code of Procurement document?
So thank you for the question, through the chair. Basically, there's been a whole new set of rules within procurement for the public sector, which is being rolled out. And the timing is still not yet confirmed, but it's within the next couple of months, hopefully by the end of the year. So one of the findings which we had was we need to update our Code of Procurement document within HDC, and we're just waiting on those wider public sector rules to be rolled out so that we can then incorporate those within our Code of Procurement. And certainly, yes, I am of the view, I mean, the rules have still not yet come out, but I am of the view that, yeah, with the new procurement rules coming out, certainly, yeah, local procurement is going to be included within that. Thanks.
If I may as well, thank you, Chair. There's also something around our economic development team as well that would be looking at in terms of enabling that local supply chain and developing the local supply chain market as well, because often the local supply chain isn't aware of how to where to look. So our annual contract register, So something around that is how transparent it, we might think we've published it, but actually, is it as transparent as, is it as accessible? How do we raise awareness? How do we engage with local businesses? So there's something around the work that the dev team can do, working with the procurement team, to actually, from the business perspective, seek to encourage that, that the spend, our spend, which is incredibly powerful, links back to our health and wealth building strategy, is spent locally within our own communities. So it's not just around the rules of procedure, it's around supporting that market development as well.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions? Councillor Jennings?
Thank you for the report, Yasir, and welcome. I just have a question really about the format of the report and the fact that it's laying out the audit findings, which is great. At what stage do we get to see the responses from management and their agreed action plan? Does it happen before it ends up on the next report, which is the implementation report, or is there any way of building that into this report as it comes to us here?
Through the chair, thanks, Councillor Jennings. I think that's a good point. So basically, I can certainly build in that in the format of this report. So SLT do look at the whole detail of all the actions that come out and all the agreed actions with the owners. I think in the current format, which I have inherited, I think that's not being presented to CGC. And if that's something which CGC would be willing to have, then I can certainly amend that format and certainly include the actions as well within these reports. Sure.
Thank you. And if I may follow on from Yasir, I think that the reference to SLT is important, because I think, Councillor Gray, you and I have spoken about that accountability and where it is owned. And that's something that we've building in to make sure that the actions are cited and SLT can have full debate and consideration of where those actions might properly sit. And I think sometimes we may think an action sits in a service with a service manager, but actually it's an organisational action, and it should then quite rightly sit with a member of SLT to be accountable for that, as opposed then but then have a service manager responsible. But it's where that accountability lies, so that there is clear ownership and corporate ownership. And I think that also follows very much the peer reviews we've had, both of the audit function, but also of the corporate peer challenge, which identified some of those considerations. So that, again, is something that we're building into that time frame. So by the time that comes to you, you can be assured that there is corporate ownership of that, and it's not just come through and appears to you without any proper consideration of the impact on the organisation.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions, or should we move? Yeah. So just to note that we've got the committee review and note the progress of the report. So now we're moving on to item number 8, the implementation of internal audit actions, and again bringing in Yasir for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So as of now, we've got 16 outstanding actions, and we have had 66 audit actions that have been closed within the last year. Out of these 16 actions, I think one of the things I would certainly want to mention is I had a detailed conversation with SLT members as well as with Councillor Harvey, and most of these actions are pretty much in their last lap. So there's just a couple of things needed, and then hopefully these actions would be closed. So although it does say it's not been implemented by the due date, they are in progress. And I would say for most of them, they are about 80 to 90% complete. We're just waiting on that final lap being done, and then they can be put in the closed actions list.
Thank you. Any comments or questions in the committee on this? Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I mean, mine is more general. I mean, you've been here sort of 2.5 months. You're our third line of defence in this organisation, and I'm curious to know, as you look at this report, where you feel we're up to and what you feel your priorities are at this particular point in time, and what assurances you can give us as a committee.
Thanks, Councillor Gray. So through the chair, I would say absolutely my priorities are certainly getting these outstanding actions closed. So I've been chasing the action owners, and I've been getting, the good thing is I've been getting quite a lot of engagement from them. A lot of the times, I think what has delayed these issues at times are teams being a bit understaffed, or key staff members have left and we are recruiting for other people. But as the updates have been provided, they are, for these audit actions, almost nearly there. So this is certainly one of my priorities. The other priorities I've got is there was the BDO report which was done on the internal audit. So it was an external quality assessment report which was done, and BDO came with some really good suggestions on internal audit, on maintaining its documentation, on training for the internal audit team. And since I've joined, I've put together an action plan for that, and I've discussed that with Michelle. And that is, again, my second priority, to really improve the standards of internal auditing within HDC, to make sure that our staff within internal audit are well equipped, well trained to do that. And that report has been really a good guidance for me as well, because that has really been, the work plan I've been following based on the action plans of that audit report. And I agree with most of the findings there. I mean, some of the key findings there are, increased focus on training, increased focus on maintaining that adequate backup documentation for all the audits that we do. So if we were to have maybe a peer review, we can show all the work we have done and how we have reached our conclusions within the audit reports that we publish.
Sorry, you forgot to mention what you're doing with next year's annual audit plan as well. Just not that we didn't know you were going to ask that question, but that's the level of conversations we're having in terms of that assurance for the organisation.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Jennings?
Thank you. I have perhaps one on a couple of specific ones, really. The third one on the first page, which was the corporate enforcement policy audit of 21-22, which had a the last update said that it would be included in the 24-25 community service plan with the target completion date of July 24. Obviously, we're in September now, but we haven't had an update there since March 24. Have you been able to find out anything about how this is going on? If I can take that as the first one, the second one I'll bring up.
Yeah, thanks through the chair. So yeah, this is one of the ones which we have still not received an update. So this is one particular item. And I had this discussion with Councillor Harvey today. And basically, we want to make sure that we have got an update on what's being done. So what we do know is that the enforcement policy is being rewritten. What we don't have is the target date of when it would be completed. And that's what exactly I'm going to work with Claudia, who's the action owner here, to just make sure that we get a definitive date on when that would be completed. What we have been provided with is it is in progress and it would be completed ASAP, but it's just that date which has not been shared with the team. So I'll make sure that I work on that one. So yeah, this was one particular one. Thanks.
And Chair, if I may, I happen to be aware from the RIPA review that there had been, when we knew the RIPA review was coming, the team had thought it would be appropriate to wait until the RIPA review had taken place in case anything emerged in recommendations that was pertinent. So I am aware that was a consideration, but the point is well made around we need something a bit more sharper now.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jennings.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the response. And I think just as a general point as well, actually, it's very welcome to see a lot more more timely updates on this report that we've perhaps had for a long while, which is great. My second point was about I think there were three really together from the Risk Management 22-23 report. Which is, I think, on page 86. And there were references here to recruiting, I believe, I'm getting a little bit lost now. I think there were three of them were talking about the approval to recruit granted for the for an unspecified position. I just wanted to check, was this the risk and controls manager, or is this a different position? And is there an update on how this recruitment is going?
Sorry, yeah. So this was for the risk and controls officer, and why we have this same update coming just now is the risk and controls officer, which we had left last month, actually beginning of this month, and we are now in the process of recruiting a replacement for them. Coming to the point on the trainings, a number of lunch and learn sessions have been done. So the only reason why I am still not putting these as complete is whilst we have done a number of these sessions, there is still a lot more that needs to be done, particularly with regards to the risk management training, and all of that actually needs to be signed off by the Director of Finance. And obviously with our previous Director of Finance leaving in July, that's not been able to happen. So what we are hoping with Suzanne now joining early next month, that we'll be able to have those sign-offs, and hopefully we can have that. But the only other slight challenge we have got here, and I think it's worth mentioning, is because the risk and control officer has left, and now I am in the process of initiating that recruitment for a new risk and controls officer. We might have a slight delay until the new person comes in. And again, this was a good chat I had with Councillor Harvey earlier today, because I would want to maintain my independence within being an internal audit, and as Councillor Gray had said earlier, being a third line of defense. So I personally wouldn't want to very actively get involved in these trainings, because this is more a risk management area. But what I am certainly involved in and trying to work ASAP is get a replacement for our risk and controls officer, who can then work alongside the new Director of Finance and hopefully close these actions.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions? No, that's fine. Thank you. So we note that the report from Yassir. On to item number 9, which is the whistleblowing policy, guidance and concerns received. And again, over to Yassir to report on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So on this one, the whistleblowing policy guidance remains the same. we have received one whistleblowing complaint. It was received in August, so roughly about a month ago. And it's still in investigation phase, so I am working on investigating the complaint. One of the things which is coming out of this investigation, so we'll get the final results for next committee meeting, but one of the things which is coming from the preliminary investigations is a bit more focus on training is needed for council staff, and particularly with regards to training and annual refresher training, because what actually happens is we have got new starts join in and they do all the induction trainings, and over the course of time, you know, they are like 2 years, 3 years into the organization, and there's no annual refresher training program, particularly with regards to some stuff like, you know, anti-bullying and harassment or health and safety stuff, because I think the crux of the complaint was around these policies and these issues. So that's just something. So I've just preempted this here, but investigation is still ongoing, and hopefully we'll be able to share the final findings and action plan with you for the November meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments and questions from the committee? No, thank you. Received that report, and thank you for that. So now moving on to item 10, you can, I know you've got to get a train, so Corporate Governance Committee Progress Report. We'll now receive the report from Habs Piercy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You have the Corporate Governance Committee Progress Report before you. I'll just draw your attention to the action taken column. It's been updated since the last meeting. The first part of the report refers to the Internal Audit Service Progress Report. That action is closed, so I'm proposing that gets deleted. I have also added in the Constitution Review Working Group because the committee's terms of reference includes the Constitution arrangements, so we'll keep you apprised as the meetings develop, and we do have members of this committee on that group, so if they do want to add anything, they can.
Thank you so much for that. That's brilliant. I'll just bring in Michelle just for an update before we close. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's you had no just checking, committee had no questions in terms of the update report from Habs. No, that's fine. So I wasn't sorry, Chair. It was really, as we close, Ollie wasn't able to join us today, but I know if he had been here, I am sure committee would have wanted to extend their thanks and well wishes. So I just wanted to flag that and give that opportunity whilst he's not here. I'm sure that he's been such a diligent attendee at this committee, particularly around the development of the risk and how that policy has developed and the strategy around that. I just wanted to say, I'm sure committee would wish him all of his best in his opportunity in terms of where he's doing his further studying, which is hugely exciting for him. We might all be in a different place as to whether we might think we were having that conversation earlier on, but it's absolutely what Ollie wants to do, so it's tremendous.
Jonathan Gray, Councillor Gray, thank you.
Call me John, yeah. Yeah, no, I'd like to sort of echo that. I mean, I've worked with Ollie for I don't know how many years. We were sort of in the trenches in various things when we were in power, if that's the right way of describing it. I'm not sure who was in power, but whether it was Ollie or me. But I'd just like to say a huge thank you, because he's put his head down, he's willingly rolled his sleeves up, many other metaphors and similes that we can use, and he's always done it cheerfully. I was thinking of Ollie, actually, given all the rain that we've been having recently, thinking that he's not going to miss those emergency calls that he had to deal with the Christmas before last, I think. But yeah, certainly I would like to wish him all the best. I'm sure he's watching online.
Thank you. And with that, I close the meeting. Thank you.